I was sitting at my desk debugging code when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Mom, and something in my gut told me this wasn't going to be a normal check-in call. I answered on the third ring expecting to hear about Dad's latest home improvement project or Jessica's wedding planning drama. Instead, Mom's voice carried a tone I'd never heard before. Casual, almost cheerful, as if she was discussing the weather. "Henry, honey, we need to tell you something. Your father and I accessed your savings account yesterday. We spent 95% of it to buy Jessica a house for her wedding gift." The words hit me like a physical blow. Before I could even process what she'd said, I heard Jessica's voice in the background getting closer to the phone. "Mom must have put me on speaker. Give me that phone," Jessica said, her voice dripping with smugness. "Henry, you don't have a single penny left. Welcome to being broke loser." And that's when I did something that shocked them both. I burst out laughing. The laughter bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me, genuine and uncontrollable. My sister's voice faltered on the other end of the line, confusion replacing her earlier cruelty. "What's so funny, Henry?" "Oh, Jessica." I managed between chuckles. "You have no idea what you've just done." But let me back up 6 months to explain why I was laughing instead of crying. It was a Tuesday evening in March when I first noticed something odd about my banking app. I'd logged in to check my balance before making a car payment, and the login history showed access from an IP address I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it might be a security breach, so I called the bank immediately. That's when I learned something that changed everything. The unauthorized access had come from someone using my social security number and mother's maiden name. The bank representative explained that whoever had accessed my account had provided enough personal information to convince their security system they were legitimate. Only family members would have that level of detailed information about me. My stomach dropped as realization hit. My own father had been secretly monitoring my finances. I spent the next week quietly investigating, and what I discovered made me sick. Dad had been checking my account balance monthly for over a year. He'd even called the bank pretending to be me, asking about my spending habits and available credit. The customer service notes showed he'd inquired about my capacity for family financial assistance just 3 months earlier. That's when I understood the truth. My parents didn't see me as their son. They saw me as their personal ATM and retirement backup plan. I called Sarah that night, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and hurt. Sarah Martinez had been my girlfriend for 2 years, and as a certified financial advisor, she'd helped me build a solid investment portfolio. She also understood family dynamics better than anyone I knew, having grown up with her own set of manipulative relatives. "They've been treating you like a piggy bank they can break whenever they want," she said after I explained the situation. Her voice was calm, but I could hear the anger underneath. "Henry, this is financial surveillance. It's a violation of your privacy and your trust." We met the next evening at her downtown office. Sarah had already prepared several documents and opened her laptop to show me various account options. "We're going to create a decoy," she explained, her fingers dancing across the keyboard. "You'll keep a modest amount in your current account, something that looks like normal savings for someone your age. Meanwhile, we'll move your real money somewhere they can never find it." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. I opened new accounts at 3 different financial institutions, each under slightly different variations of my name. My cryptocurrency investments went into a digital wallet with security protocols that would make Fort Knox jealous. My index fund portfolio transferred to an investment firm that specialized in privacy protection for clients. The business venture I'd been developing with my college roommate Alex moved its funding to a corporate account that couldn't be traced back to my personal finances. Within 2 weeks, my original savings account contained exactly $15,000. To my parents, this would look like the modest savings of a 28-year-old software engineer who was responsible but not wealthy. Meanwhile, my actual net worth was quietly growing in accounts they'd never even imagined existed. Sarah and I also documented everything. We printed bank statements showing my father's unauthorized access, saved screenshots of his phone calls to my bank and even recorded a conversation where he casually asked me about my financial capacity to help family members in need. This isn't just about protecting your money, Sarah explained as we organized the evidence. This is about protecting your future and forcing them to respect boundaries. They're counting on your guilt and family loyalty to keep you silent. But silence enables their behavior. During those months of preparation, I watched my family's dynamics with new eyes. Jessica had never held a steady job in her life, yet somehow she always had money for shopping trips and expensive dinners. My parents constantly complained about their own finances, yet they'd managed to fund Jessica's lifestyle for years. The math didn't add up until I realized where the money was actually coming from. They'd been planning to tap into my savings for Jessica's wedding expenses all along. Every time Dad asked about my work, every casual question about my salary, every comment about my responsibility to family had been building toward this moment. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They assumed I was the same naive, family-oriented guy who'd always put their needs before his own. They had no idea that their betrayal had already transformed me into someone who planned 3 steps ahead. As I sat at my desk that day listening to Jessica mock me over the phone, I realized their theft had actually done me a favor. They'd shown their true colors while I still had the power to respond. The decoy account had served its purpose perfectly. And now it was time for the real game to begin. "Henry, you need to get over here right now." Dad's voice boomed through the phone after I'd finished laughing. "We're having a family meeting to discuss your attitude about this situation." 20 minutes later, I pulled into my childhood driveway, taking a moment to compose myself before walking through the front door. The house looked exactly the same as it had during my high school years, with Mom's collection of ceramic angels still cluttering every available surface, and Dad's fishing trophies lining the mantelpiece. Jessica was sprawled across the living room couch like she owned the place, her designer handbag tossed carelessly on Mom's antique coffee table. Beside her sat Marcus Thompson, her unemployed fiancé, who'd been living off her family's generosity for the past 8 months. Marcus had the kind of smug expression that suggested he thought he just won the lottery. Well, look who decided to show up," Jessica said, not bothering to look away from her phone. "I hope you're ready to apologize for your little outburst earlier." Mom emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of coffee cups, her movements nervous and jerky. She'd always been the peacemaker in our family, the one who tried to smooth over conflicts before they escalated. But today something in her demeanor suggested she knew they'd crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Dad gestured toward the remaining chair, his expression stern and unyielding. "Sit down, son. We need to clear the air about some things." I settled into the chair, noting how they'd arranged the seating to make me feel isolated and outnumbered. It was a classic manipulation tactic, one I'd seen them use on me countless times throughout my childhood. But this time I felt detached from their theater, like I was watching actors perform a play I'd already seen. "Henry, your mother and I have been planning this wedding gift for Jessica for over 2 years. Dad began, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he'd used when I was 12 and had broken curfew. "We knew Jessica deserved something special for her big day, and we knew you'd want to be part of making that happen. The house cost $400,000, Mom added quietly, setting down her coffee cup with shaking hands. "It's a beautiful 3-bedroom colonial in Maplewood Estates, with a 2-car garage and a finished basement. Jessica fell in love with it the moment she saw it." Marcus leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with excitement. "It's got granite countertops, hardwood floors throughout, and a backyard that's perfect for barbecues. Plus, the neighborhood has excellent schools for when we start having kids." I nodded slowly, processing the numbers in my head. "So you took $150,000 from my account, which means you still needed another $250,000. Where did that come from?" The silence that followed was deafening. Mom and Dad exchanged a look that spoke volumes, and I realized they were about to drop another bombshell. "We took out a second mortgage on this house." Dad finally admitted, his voice losing some of its earlier confidence. "The payments are $800 a month for the next 30 years. And since you're family, we figured you'd help us handle those payments." Mom added quickly. It's really Jessica's house, but we're all contributing to make it possible. Jessica's laugh was sharp and cruel. Don't act like this is some huge burden, Henry. You make good money at that tech job, and you don't have any real expenses, no wife, no kids, no social life to spend money on. This is literally the least you can do for family. Marcus nodded enthusiastically, apparently emboldened by Jessica's attitude. Besides, think of it as an investment in Jessica's future. When we have kids, you'll be Uncle Henry. Don't you want your nieces and nephews to grow up in a nice house? I stared at them for a long moment, marveling at their audacity. They'd not only stolen my money, but had also committed me to 30 years of mortgage payments without asking my permission. In their minds, I was nothing more than a resource to be exploited. Let me make sure I understand this correctly. I said, keeping my voice steady and calm. You accessed my savings account without permission, took almost every penny I had used it as a down payment on a house for Jessica, and then signed legal documents that make me responsible for helping pay off your second mortgage. That's a very negative way to look at it, Mom said defensively. This is about family, Henry. This is about supporting each other and making sacrifices for the people we love. Jessica's phone buzzed and she glanced at it with a satisfied smile. Speaking of family support, Marcus and I were talking about the other expenses coming up. The wedding's going to cost at least $50,000 and we want a honeymoon in Europe for 3 weeks. Plus, this house is going to need some updates. The kitchen appliances are a few years old, and the master bathroom could use renovation. My blood pressure spiked as the full scope of their expectations became clear. This wasn't just about the house. They were planning to turn me into their personal funding source for Jessica's entire lifestyle. How much do you think I make exactly? I asked, genuinely curious about their assumptions. Well, you're some kind of computer programmer, right? Marcus said dismissively. Those guys make decent money. Probably $60,000 or $70,000 a year. Maybe more since you've been doing it for a while. Dad nodded approvingly. Marcus makes a good point. You've been living pretty modestly, so you should have plenty of room in your budget to help with family expenses. It's not like you have any major financial commitments of your own. I looked around the room at these people who shared my DNA but seemed to know nothing about my actual life. They'd constructed an entire fantasy about my finances based on assumptions and wishful thinking. In their minds, I was a convenient cash cow who existed solely to fund Jessica's dreams. And if I say no, I ask quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Jessica's eyes narrowed to slits, and Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his seat. You're not going to say no, Jessica said, her voice deadly serious. Because you're family, and family doesn't abandon each other. Besides, what choice do you have? We've already bought the house, and Mom and Dad have already signed the mortgage papers. You can either be part of the solution, or you can be the selfish brother who destroyed his sister's happiness. Dad leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from authoritative to threatening. Henry, I raised you better than this. Your mother and I sacrificed for years to give you and Jessica good lives. We paid for your college, supported you when you were getting started in your career, and never asked for anything in return. Now it's time for you to step up and be a man. Mom dabbed at her eyes with a tissue, though I noticed the tears seemed forced and theatrical. I never thought I'd see the day when my own son would be so selfish and ungrateful. All we're asking is for you to help your sister start her new life. Is that really too much? I sat there absorbing their words, their expectations, and their complete disregard for my own wishes and financial well-being. In that moment, I realized that this conversation wasn't really about money at all. It was about power and control, and the fundamental question of whether I was going to spend the rest of my life being manipulated by people who viewed me as a resource rather than a person. I need some time to think about this, I said, finally standing up from my chair. Jessica's laugh was bitter and mocking. Think about what you don't have any choice in this, Henry. We've already made the decisions. All you have to do is accept reality and start making those mortgage payments. As I walked toward the door, I could hear them discussing the practical details of my financial servitude. Marcus was suggesting I set up automatic payments to make things easier for everyone. Mom was calculating how much I should contribute to the wedding expenses. Dad was already planning modifications to the house that would require additional funding. None of them seemed to consider that I might have other plans. I didn't leave immediately. Instead, I stood in the doorway, listening to my family discuss my financial obligations as if I wasn't even in the room. Their casual assumption that I had no choice in the matter was both infuriating and illuminating. "You know what I think," Jessica said, her voice rising with excitement. "Henry should just move back home for a while. He's paying rent on that apartment downtown, which is just money down the drain. If he lived here, he could save money and contribute more to our family expenses." Marcus nodded, enthusiastically, warming to the theme. "That's actually brilliant. Plus, he could help with maintenance on the new house. I mean, he works with computers, so he's probably good with technical stuff. We could save thousands on repair costs." I turned around slowly, my movement catching their attention. The room fell silent as they realized I'd been listening to their conversation. "Oh, good, you're still here," Jessica said, not even having the grace to look embarrassed. "We were just discussing some practical arrangements that would benefit everyone." "Were you now?" I asked, stepping back into the room and closing the door behind me. "Tell me more about these arrangements." Dad cleared his throat, apparently designated as the family spokesperson. "Well, son, we were thinking about ways to make this situation work better for everyone involved. If you moved back home temporarily, you could eliminate your rent payments and redirect that money toward family priorities. And I could really use help with the house projects," Marcus added eagerly. "There's a lot of work that needs to be done, and having an extra pair of hands would be invaluable." Mom smiled brightly as if she'd just solved world hunger. "Plus, I miss having you around, sweetie. It would be like old times, except now you'd be helping your sister start her new life instead of just thinking about yourself." I looked at Jessica, who was watching me with an expression of smug satisfaction. "And what's your take on this arrangement, sister dear?" Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I think it's perfect. You get to contribute to something meaningful instead of wasting your money on your boring little life. And let's be honest, Henry, it's not like you're using that apartment for anything interesting. When's the last time you brought a girl home? When's the last time you did anything that mattered?" The cruelty in her voice was stunning, but it wasn't unexpected. Jessica had always been skilled at finding people's vulnerabilities and pressing on them until they broke. What surprised me was how little her words affected me now. "You seem to have given this a lot of thought," I said calmly. "How long have you been planning this intervention?" Jessica's eyes gleamed with triumph, apparently interpreting my calm tone as surrender. "Longer than you might think, actually. I've been watching your social media, Henry. I've been paying attention to your career updates and your lifestyle choices. You're 28 years old. And what do you have to show for it? A decent job, a modest apartment, and no significant relationships. You're basically a walking ATM with no other purpose." Marcus leaned forward, apparently emboldened by Jessica's attack. "She's right, man. I mean, no offense, but what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? You're just drifting through life without any real goals or commitments. At least now you'd have something meaningful to contribute to." Mom nodded sadly, as if I were a terminally ill patient they were discussing. "Henry, honey, we've been worried about you for a long time. You work all the time. You don't date seriously. You don't seem to have any close friends. Maybe this is exactly what you need to give your life some purpose and direction." Dad crossed his arms, his expression stern and paternal. "Your mother's right, son. Sometimes a man needs to be pushed out of his comfort zone to reach his potential. This family financial commitment could be exactly what you need to grow up and start taking life seriously." I felt something cold and calculating settle in my chest as I listened to their analysis of my life. They weren't just stealing my money, they were systematically dismantling my sense of self-worth and autonomy, trying to convince me that I was worthless without their direction and purpose. "Jessica," I said quietly, "can I ask you something?" She waved her hand dismissively. "Sure, but make it quick. Marcus and I have appointments with the wedding caterer this afternoon." How long have you known about my real financial situation? The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Jessica's confident expression faltered slightly, and I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. What do you mean? She asked, but her voice had lost its earlier smugness. I mean, how long have you known that the account Mom and Dad accessed wasn't actually my primary savings account? The silence that followed was deafening. Mom and Dad exchanged confused glances, clearly having no idea what I was talking about. But Jessica's face had gone pale, and Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the couch cushions. I don't know what you're talking about, Jessica said, but her voice was shaking now. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, scrolling through several different account screens. See, the thing is, I've been keeping track of who's been accessing my financial information. And it wasn't just Dad making unauthorized inquiries about my money. Dad's face flushed red with embarrassment and anger. Now wait just a minute, Henry. I never… Dad, please, I interrupted gently. I have records of every phone call you made to my bank. Every unauthorized login to my account. Every attempt to gather information about my financial status. But what's interesting is that some of those inquiries came from phone numbers that weren't yours. I looked directly at Jessica, whose hands were trembling now. Care to explain how you got my account information, sister? The confession came tumbling out in a rush of panicked words. I only did it because I care about this family. You were being selfish with your money, just sitting on it while the rest of us struggled. Mom and Dad deserve to retire comfortably, and I deserve to have a nice wedding. You were never going to help voluntarily, so I had to find another way. Marcus stared at his fiancée in shock. Jessica, you never told me you'd been… Shut up, Marcus. She snapped, her composure completely shattered now. You were perfectly happy to benefit from the information when I told you Henry had enough money to pay for our whole wedding. Mom's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. Jessica Marie Thompson, what exactly are you saying? The dam burst. And Jessica's carefully constructed facade crumbled entirely. I'm saying I've been monitoring Henry's finances for 8 months? I'm saying I convinced you and Dad to ask for his help because I knew he could afford it. I'm saying I've been planning this whole intervention because Henry's too selfish to share his wealth voluntarily. Dad's voice was barely above a whisper. You manipulated us into stealing from your brother. I didn't manipulate anybody, Jessica screamed, jumping to her feet. I just provided information about Henry's financial capacity and suggested that it was time for him to contribute to this family instead of just taking from it. Marcus stood up slowly, his face pale with realization. Jessica, if Henry reports this to the police, he won't, Jessica said fiercely, whirling to face me. Because he knows what will happen to this family if he does. Mom and Dad could go to prison. The house would be foreclosed. Everything would fall apart, and it would be his fault for being vindictive and cruel. She stepped closer to me, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You think you're so smart, Henry, but you're trapped. You can either go along with our plan and be part of this family, or you can destroy us all and live with the consequences. Either way, you're not getting your money back. I looked around the room at my family members, each of them watching me with different expressions of fear, anger, and desperation. They'd painted themselves into a corner through their own greed and manipulation, and now they were expecting me to rescue them from the consequences. Jessica, I said softly, there's something you need to understand. What she demanded, her voice cracking with strain. I smiled, feeling genuinely peaceful for the first time in months. I've been recording this entire conversation. I held up my phone, its screen clearly showing a recording app that had been running for the past 20 minutes. The timestamp indicated it had captured everything from the moment I'd walked back into the room. You son of a… Jessica started lunging toward me, but Marcus grabbed her arm. Jessica, stop, he hissed. You're making it worse. Dad's face had turned an alarming shade of red. Henry, you turn that thing off right now. This is a private family conversation. Actually, Dad, this stopped being a private conversation the moment you all started discussing criminal activity. I said, calmly, ending the recording and immediately uploading it to a secure cloud server. And before you ask, yes, it's already backed up in multiple locations. I walked over to my laptop bag, which I'd left by the front door, and pulled out a manila folder thick with documents. I've been preparing for this conversation for quite some time. Sarah helped me gather everything we'd need. Sarah, Mom asked weakly. Who's Sarah? My girlfriend. She's a certified financial advisor, and she specializes in cases involving financial elder abuse and family fraud. I opened the folder and spread several documents across the coffee table. These are printouts of every unauthorized access to my bank accounts over the past 14 months. The papers showed a clear pattern of intrusion with dates, times, and IP addresses highlighted in yellow. Dad's face went white as he recognized his own computer's digital fingerprint on multiple entries. This document, I continued pulling out another sheet, shows the phone records from my bank, including transcripts of conversations where someone claiming to be me asked about my account balances and available credit. The bank was helpful enough to provide voice recordings, which clearly aren't my voice. Marcus was staring at the papers like they might bite him. Henry, maybe we can work something out here. I mean, no real harm was done, right? It's all family money anyway. I ignored him and pulled out another stack of documents. These are the legal documents that were filed to access my accounts. Notice anything interesting about the signatures? Jessica snatched one of the papers and studied it frantically. Her forged version of my signature was crude and obvious when compared to my actual signature on my driver's license, which I'd photocopied for comparison. The bank's fraud department is very interested in these discrepancies, I said conversationally. Apparently, identity theft and financial fraud are federal crimes regardless of whether the perpetrators are family members. Mom started crying real tears this time. Henry, please, we never meant for it to go this far. We just wanted to help Jessica have a beautiful wedding. No, Mom, I said gently but firmly. You wanted me to pay for Jessica's wedding, her house, her lifestyle, and probably her future children's college tuition. You weren't helping her. You were enslaving me. The front doorbell rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. I glanced at my watch. That would be David Chen, my lawyer. I asked him to stop by at 3:30. Dad's voice was hoarse with panic. Henry, what have you done? I've protected myself and documented your crimes, I replied, walking toward the front door. David specializes in financial crimes and family law. I thought you might want to understand the full legal implications of your actions. David Chen was a sharp-dressed man in his early 40s, who'd graduated from Harvard Law School with my college roommate Alex. He carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who'd never lost a case he cared about winning. Good afternoon, Mr. Patterson, he said formally, shaking my hand. Are these the family members we discussed? They are, I confirmed, leading him into the living room where my family sat frozen in various states of shock and terror. David opened his briefcase and pulled out a legal pad, his movements precise and professional. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is David Chen, and I represent Henry Patterson in matters relating to financial crimes committed against him by members of his immediate family. Jessica found her voice first. We don't need a lawyer. This is a family matter. David's smile was polite but cold. Actually, ma'am, this stopped being a family matter the moment you committed federal banking fraud. Identity theft, forgery, and unauthorized access to financial accounts are serious crimes that carry significant penalties. He consulted his notes and looked directly at my father. Mr. Patterson, based on the evidence Henry has provided you, face potential charges of wire fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes. The federal sentencing guidelines suggest 15 to 20 years in prison for these offenses. Dad's hands were shaking as he reached for his coffee cup. But I'm his father. Surely there's some kind of family exception. There is not, David replied matter-of-factly. In fact, courts tend to view financial crimes against family members as particularly egregious because they violate trust relationships. He turned to Jessica, his expression neutral but intimidating. Ms. Thompson, your situation is potentially more serious because you appear to have been the organizing force behind this conspiracy. The recorded conversation Henry just captured includes what sounds like a confession to long-term financial surveillance and manipulation. Marcus buried his face in his hands. Oh God, Jessica, what did you get us into? The house purchase presents an additional complication. David continued consulting another page of notes. Because the down payment was obtained through fraudulent means, the transaction itself may be voided by the court. You could lose the house entirely, and the mortgage holders would pursue you for the full amount of the loan. Mom was sobbing openly now. Henry, please, there has to be some way to fix this without destroying our family. I looked at her with genuine sadness. Mom? The family was destroyed the moment you all decided I existed only to fund Jessica's dreams. But David's right about one thing. You're all facing serious criminal charges that could result in prison time. However, David interjected, his tone shifting slightly, my client is not entirely without mercy. He's authorized me to present you with an alternative. The room fell silent except for Mom's quiet crying. Everyone was staring at David like he was offering them a lifeline in a stormy sea. What kind of alternative? Dad asked cautiously. David pulled out another document. Full restitution of the stolen funds within 30 days, plus agreement to a court-supervised family financial counseling program, plus signed agreements never to access Henry's financial information again without explicit written permission. And if we agree to these terms, Jessica asked, her voice barely audible, then Henry would consider not filing criminal charges, though the bank's fraud department may proceed with their own investigation, regardless of his wishes. Marcus looked up hopefully. So we could avoid prison, potentially, David replied. But only if you meet every single condition exactly as specified, and only if Henry decides your compliance demonstrates genuine remorse rather than simple fear of consequences. I watched my family members exchange desperate glances, each of them calculating their options and finding them extremely limited. They'd gambled with my trust and financial security, and now they were learning that actions have consequences. There's one more thing, I said quietly, drawing their attention back to me. Before anyone agrees to anything, there's something else you all need to know about my financial situation. I walked over to my laptop bag and pulled out my computer, setting it on the coffee table where everyone could see the screen. David, would you mind witnessing what I'm about to show them? Of course, David replied, positioning himself where he could see both the screen and my family's reactions. I opened my laptop and logged into my investment account dashboard. The numbers that appeared on the screen caused an immediate and dramatic shift in the room's atmosphere. Mom gasped audibly. Dad's coffee cup slipped from his hands and shattered on the hardwood floor. Marcus's mouth fell open so wide I thought his jaw might dislocate. But it was Jessica's reaction that was most telling. Her face went through a rapid progression of emotions: shock, disbelief, rage, and finally a kind of horrified understanding. $2.8 million, I said calmly, scrolling through the various investment accounts. Cryptocurrency portfolio, index funds, growth stocks, and a money market account for liquid assets. The cryptocurrency section alone showed a balance that exceeded what most people made in 5 years. My Bitcoin investments had performed exceptionally well, and my diversified portfolio of alternative coins had grown exponentially over the past 3 years. This can't be real, Jessica whispered, leaning forward to stare at the screen. You're some kind of computer programmer. You don't make this kind of money. I clicked over to another browser tab, revealing my business banking account. Actually, Jessica, I'm not just a computer programmer. I'm a software developer who created a mobile application that generates passive income. The business account showed monthly deposits ranging from $28,000 to $35,000, dating back 18 months. I developed a productivity app for small businesses that had quietly become one of the most popular tools in its category. Marcus was doing math in his head, his eyes growing wider with each calculation. $30,000 a month, that's $360,000 a year. Just from an app just from one app, I corrected. I have 3 others in development, plus consulting contracts with 2 major corporations. Dad found his voice, though it came out as a hoarse croak. Henry, if you have all this money, why did you let us think you were struggling? Before I could answer, there was another knock at the front door. I glanced at my watch again. That would be Alex Rivera, my business partner. Perfect timing. Alex Rivera had been my roommate at Georgia Tech, and we'd maintained our friendship through the years as our careers took off. He was now the CEO of our joint startup company, and his presence always commanded attention. At 6'3", with the kind of confident demeanor that comes from successfully managing million-dollar budgets, Alex could dominate a room without saying a word. "Henry," he said warmly, shaking my hand before scanning the room with curious eyes. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Not at all," I replied. "Actually, your timing is perfect. I was just explaining our business arrangement to my family." Alex's expression shifted to professional mode as he recognized the tension in the room. "Should I come back later?" "No, please stay," I said, gesturing to an empty chair. "In fact, why don't you tell them about the company valuation we discussed yesterday?" Alex settled into the chair and opened his own laptop. "Well, as of yesterday's meeting with our venture capital investors, Phoenix Solutions LLC has been valued at $5.2 million. Henry owns 45% of the company, which represents a personal asset value of approximately $2.3 million. The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. Alex looked around the room with growing confusion. "Did I say something wrong?" he asked. "No," I replied. "You said something that puts my family's recent behavior in perspective." Alex's eyebrows rose as understanding dawned. "Oh, this is about the family financial situation you mentioned last month." "The what?" Jessica's voice was sharp with panic. Alex looked uncomfortable, apparently realizing he'd stepped into a family minefield. "Henry mentioned that some family members had been making inappropriate financial requests. He was concerned about establishing proper boundaries." Marcus was staring at me with a mixture of awe and terror. "You've been rich this whole time, like actually rich." "I've been financially successful," I corrected. "But I've also been careful about who I shared that information with, and apparently my caution was justified." Jessica's composure finally cracked entirely. "You let me think you were some pathetic loser living paycheck to paycheck. You sat there and listened to me mock your lifestyle when you knew you had millions of dollars." "Yes," I said simply, "I did." The raw fury in her voice was startling. Why would you do that to us?" "Because I wanted to see who you really were," I replied calmly. "I wanted to know if my family loved me for myself or saw me as a resource to be exploited." Now I have my answer. Alex cleared his throat diplomatically. "Henry, perhaps I should explain about the expansion plans." I nodded, turning my laptop screen toward my family again. "Alex and I are launching a second company next quarter. We've already secured $8 million in startup funding, and the projected valuation for year 3 is somewhere between $50 and $75 million. Dad's voice was barely a whisper. $50 million. Potentially, Alex confirmed. Henry's track record with app development and my experience with scaling businesses make us an attractive investment opportunity. We're essentially building the next generation of business productivity software. Mom was staring at me like I was a stranger. "Henry, I don't understand. If you have all this money, why did you live so modestly? Why didn't you tell us?" "Because I wanted a normal relationship with my family," I said sadly. "I wanted to know that you loved me for who I am, not what I could provide. And I wanted to protect myself from exactly this kind of situation." Jessica's laugh was bitter and hysterical. "So this was all some kind of test you set us up to fail?" "No, Jessica. I gave you every opportunity to treat me with respect and love. You chose to see me as a bank account with legs. You chose to manipulate Mom and Dad into stealing from me. You chose to mock my life and demand that I fund yours." Marcus had gone very pale. "Jessica, do you realize what we've done? We just stole money from someone worth millions of dollars. Someone who could destroy our lives with a phone call." "The irony," David interjected quietly, "is that the amount stolen represents less than 1% of Henry's total net worth. This was never about the money. This was about respect and family relationships." Alex was looking around the room with dawning comprehension. "Wait, Are you saying these people actually stole money from Henry? $147,500. I confirmed. From a decoy account I set up specifically to protect my real assets. Alex's expression hardened. Henry, you know I have connections with federal financial crime investigators. This kind of behavior, I know, I said. And I appreciate your concern. But I'm hoping we can resolve this within the family. I looked directly at Jessica, who was still staring at my laptop screen with a mixture of rage and despair. The question now is whether my family is capable of learning from this experience and building healthier relationships going forward. The numbers on the screen seemed to glow in the afternoon light, streaming through Mom's lace curtains. My family sat in stunned silence, each of them processing the reality that they'd betrayed someone who had the power to either forgive them or destroy them completely. The choice was entirely up to them. I closed my laptop and stood up, walking over to the window where I could see Jessica's new house across town in the distance. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me, and I decided it was time to share the final piece of information that would complete their understanding. There's something else you all need to know, I said, turning back to face the room. Something that makes this situation even more interesting than you realize. Jessica's voice was raw with exhaustion and defeat. What now, Henry? What other secrets have you been keeping? I pulled out my phone and opened a real estate app, scrolling to a specific listing before handing it to Jessica. Take a look at this property listing. She stared at the screen for several seconds before her face went completely white. This is impossible. Marcus leaned over to look at the phone, and his reaction was equally dramatic. That's the house next door to ours. The big colonial with the circular driveway. 5 bedrooms, 4.5 bathrooms, finished basement with home theater, 3-car garage, and 2 acres of landscaped gardens. I recited from memory. I bought it 3 weeks ago, for cash. The silence that followed was profound. Mom reached for the phone with trembling hands, studying the photos and property details as if they might change if she looked hard enough. $650,000, she read aloud. You paid $650,000 for a house next door to Jessica's. Actually, the asking price was $700,000, I corrected. But cash buyers get discounts and the sellers were motivated to close quickly. Alex was grinning now, apparently enjoying the theatrical nature of the revelation. Henry, you didn't tell me you'd decided on that property? Congratulations. Thanks. Sarah and I are moving in next month. We're getting married in September, and we wanted to be settled before the wedding. If the earlier revelations had been bombshells, this announcement was a nuclear explosion. Jessica's phone clattered to the floor as she stared at me in absolute horror. You're getting married, Mom asked weakly, to Sarah, the financial advisor. I pulled out my phone and showed them a photo of the engagement ring I'd given Sarah 2 weeks earlier. The 3-carat diamond caught the light beautifully, and the vintage setting complemented her elegant taste perfectly. She said yes immediately, I said with genuine happiness. We've been planning this for months. The ring cost more than most people make in a year, but she's worth every penny. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. You're going to be living next door to me. For the next 30 years, assuming you can keep up with your mortgage payments, I confirmed. Sarah's already planning the garden landscaping. She wants to install a fountain that will be visible from your kitchen window. Marcus was doing rapid calculations in his head. Jessica, do you understand what this means? Every day for the rest of our lives, we're going to see Henry's success right outside our door. Every barbecue, every party, every moment of our lives will be a reminder of what we lost. Dad finally found his voice again. Henry, why would you do this to your sister? I didn't do anything to Jessica, I replied calmly. I bought a beautiful house for my future wife. The fact that it happens to be next door to the house Jessica guilted you into stealing money to buy for her is simply a coincidence. Alex was studying the situation with professional interest. Actually, Henry, from a real estate perspective, this is brilliant. Your property value will continue to appreciate, and you'll have the satisfaction of knowing that your success is a daily reminder to people who tried to exploit you. Jessica stood up abruptly, her hands clenched into fists. I won't live next door to you. I'll sell the house. With what money? I asked reasonably. You're unemployed. Marcus is unemployed, and you've just committed crimes that could result in prison time. Your credit is probably not sufficient to qualify for another mortgage, especially after the background checks reveal your recent legal troubles. David consulted his notes again. Actually, there's another consideration. If criminal charges are filed, the house could be subject to asset forfeiture as the proceeds of criminal activity. Jessica might lose it entirely. Marcus buried his face in his hands. This is a nightmare. This is an absolute nightmare. It doesn't have to be, I said, my voice softening slightly. There's still time to make this right, but it requires genuine remorse and real changes in behavior. Mom wiped her eyes with a tissue. What do you want from us, Henry? I want my family back, I said honestly. But I want a family that's based on mutual respect and love, not manipulation and exploitation. I want parents who are proud of my success instead of scheming to steal from me. I want a sister who celebrates my happiness instead of resenting my achievements. I walked back to the coffee table and picked up David's legal documents. The choice is yours. You can face criminal prosecution and lose everything, or you can agree to make restitution and attend family counseling to rebuild our relationships. Jessica's voice was small and defeated. If we agree to counseling, will you cancel the wedding plans? Will you move somewhere else? No, I said firmly. My life choices are no longer subject to your approval or manipulation. Sarah and I will live where we want to live, and you'll need to find a way to accept that reality. Alex stood up and began packing his laptop. Henry, I should let you handle this family discussion privately. But congratulations on the house and the engagement. Sarah's a wonderful woman, and you two deserve every happiness. After Alex left the room, felt smaller and more intimate. My family sat in various states of shock and contemplation, each of them processing the complete reversal of their expectations. I have one more thing to show you, I said, pulling out my phone again. This is the guest list for our wedding reception. The list included over 200 names, including colleagues, friends, business associates, and extended family members. Notably absent were the 4 people sitting in this living room. You're not inviting us to your wedding? Mom asked, her voice breaking. I'm not inviting people who view me as a resource rather than a son and brother, I replied. But if you can demonstrate genuine change through counseling and making amends, that decision could be reconsidered. Jessica looked at the floor, her earlier defiance completely gone. How long do we have to decide? David answered for me. The bank's fraud investigation is proceeding regardless of your decision. But if you want to avoid additional criminal charges, you have 72 hours to begin the restitution process and sign the counseling agreements. I looked around at my family members one final time. I never wanted it to come to this. All I ever wanted was to be loved and respected for who I am. But your greed and manipulation forced me to protect myself. Dad's voice was hoarse with emotion. Son, we made terrible mistakes. We let Jessica's demands cloud our judgment, and we forgot that you're our child too, not just a solution to our problems. That's a start, I said quietly. But words are easy. Actions are what matter now. As I packed up my laptop and documents, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The family dynamics that had shaped my entire childhood were finally exposed for what they really were. Whether they could be rebuilt into something healthier remained to be seen. But for the first time in my life, I was free to find out. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of our new home, watching Sarah arrange fresh flowers in a crystal vase, while sunlight streamed through the windows overlooking our garden. The fountain she'd dreamed of sparkled in the morning light, and the sound of water cascading over natural stone created a peaceful backdrop to our conversation. Henry, your parents just called, Sarah said, glancing toward the phone. They wanted to confirm dinner plans for Sunday. I smiled, still amazed by how much had changed since that confrontational afternoon in my childhood home. Did they mention whether Jessica and Marcus are joining us? They are. and Jessica asked if she could bring the potato salad she's been perfecting in her cooking class. The transformation hadn't been easy or immediate. Those first weeks after the confrontation had been painful for everyone involved. True to their word, my parents had managed to secure a loan to return the stolen money within the required time frame. Jessica and Marcus had both found employment, something that had seemed impossible just months earlier. More importantly, they'd all committed to the family counseling program David had recommended. Dr. Patricia Williams, our family therapist, had guided us through some difficult conversations about boundaries, expectations, and the difference between love and financial obligation. The sessions had been emotionally exhausting, but they'd also created space for honest communication that our family had never experienced before. I got promoted to shift supervisor. Jessica had announced during one session 3 months ago, her voice carrying a pride I'd never heard before. "It's only an extra $2 an hour, but it feels good to earn something myself." Marcus had found work with a local landscaping company, discovering a talent for garden design that surprised everyone, including himself. "Working with my hands feels more honest than sitting around waiting for handouts," he'd admitted during another session. The most significant change had come from my parents. Dad had taken early retirement from his factory job and started a small furniture restoration business in their garage. Mom had begun volunteering at the local literacy center, finding purpose in helping adults learn to read. They seemed younger and more energetic than they'd been in years. "We spent so many years worrying about money that we forgot to actually live," Mom had explained during a recent dinner at their house. "Watching you succeed made us feel like failures, so we tried to claim some of your success instead of building our own." The house next door had become a source of motivation rather than resentment. Jessica and Marcus had gradually transformed it from a symbol of entitlement into a genuine home. They'd painted the exterior, planted a vegetable garden, and even installed a small playground in the backyard for the neighborhood children. "I drive by your house every day on my way to work." Jessica had told me last month, her voice thoughtful rather than bitter. "At first it made me angry, but now it reminds me that success is possible if you're willing to work for it." Our relationship had evolved into something neither of us had expected. We weren't best friends, but we'd become siblings who respected each other's boundaries and celebrated each other's achievements. She'd even helped Sarah and me plan our wedding reception, using organizational skills she'd never known she possessed. The wedding had been everything Sarah and I had dreamed of. Held in the garden of our new home, it had been intimate and meaningful, with my family playing important roles in the ceremony. Dad had walked Sarah down the aisle when her own father couldn't travel from California. Jessica had served as coordinator, ensuring every detail was perfect. Mom and Marcus had worked together to prepare a buffet that impressed even our most sophisticated guests. "I'm proud of you," Dad had whispered as we danced at the reception. "Not because of your money or your success, but because you found a way to save this family when we almost destroyed it." Sarah finished arranging the flowers and walked over to where I stood at the window. "What are you thinking about?" "Just reflecting on how much has changed," I replied, wrapping my arms around her waist. "A year ago, I thought I might have to cut my family out of my life completely. But you didn't give up on them," she said, leaning back against my chest. "You gave them a chance to prove they could change." The business had continued to thrive beyond our most optimistic projections. Alex and I had successfully launched our second company, and the valuation had already exceeded our 3-year goals. But more importantly, I'd learned to use my financial success as a tool for building relationships rather than protecting myself from them. I'd helped my parents refinance their house at a lower interest rate, but only after they demonstrated 6 months of consistent mortgage payments. I'd invested in Marcus's landscaping business when he'd developed a solid business plan and shown he could manage money responsibly. I'd even helped Jessica enroll in college classes to pursue a degree in business management, but the tuition payments were structured as a loan with clear repayment terms. The difference, Dr. Williams had explained during our final family session, is that Henry's help now comes with respect and boundaries rather than guilt and obligation. This creates healthier relationships for everyone involved. My phone buzzed with a text message from Alex. Board meeting confirmed for Thursday. The third company launch is approved for next quarter. Your net worth should hit 8 figures by Christmas. I smiled at the message, but didn't feel the same rush of excitement I might have experienced a year ago. Financial success was satisfying, but it paled in comparison to the deeper fulfillment I'd found in rebuilding family relationships and creating a life with Sarah. Sarah, I said, turning to face her completely. Do you ever regret how we handled the situation with my family? She considered the question carefully before answering. I think you handled it perfectly. You could have simply cut them off and protected yourself. Instead, you found a way to hold them accountable while still giving them a chance to grow. The doorbell rang, interrupting our conversation. Through the front window, I could see Jessica and Marcus standing on our porch, both carrying covered dishes for Sunday dinner prep. They're early, Sarah observed. Jessica's been excited about trying the new potato salad recipe, I replied, walking toward the front door. She's discovered she actually enjoys cooking. As I opened the door, Jessica's face lit up with genuine warmth. Henry, I hope we're not too early. I wanted to get the salad chilled properly before everyone arrives. Marcus held up a small potted plant. I brought this from the nursery. I thought it might look nice near your front steps. These small gestures of thoughtfulness had become routine over the past few months. My family had learned to contribute to gatherings rather than simply expecting to be provided for. More importantly, they'd begun to see me as a person worthy of their consideration rather than just a resource to be managed. Come in, Sarah said warmly, hugging both of them. Your parents called to say they'll be here at 4 with dessert. As we gathered in the kitchen, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. The pain of discovering my family's betrayal had been overwhelming, but it had also created an opportunity for all of us to examine our relationships and make conscious choices about who we wanted to be. Jessica set her potato salad in the refrigerator and turned to face me, with an expression I'd rarely seen during our childhood. Henry, can I tell you something? Of course. I've been thinking about what Dr. Williams said last month about gratitude and perspective. A year ago, I thought I deserved everything I wanted without having to work for it. I thought your success meant less opportunity for me. So I resented you instead of learning from you. She paused, choosing her words carefully. But now I understand that your success actually created opportunities for all of us. You could have destroyed us when we betrayed you, but instead, you found a way to help us become better people. Marcus nodded in agreement. Jessica's right. We spent so many years focused on what we thought we deserved that we never appreciated what we actually had. Living next door to you reminds us every day that good things come to people who work for them and treat others with respect. Sarah reached over and squeezed my hand. I'm proud of how you handled everything, but I'm even more proud of how gracefully you've allowed your family to rebuild their relationships with you. As the afternoon progressed and my parents arrived with homemade apple pie, I watched my family interact with genuine care and consideration for each other. The dynamics had fundamentally shifted from a hierarchy based on financial dependency to a network of mutual support and respect. Dad and Marcus discussed Marcus's plans to expand his landscaping business into commercial properties. Mom and Jessica compared notes about their respective educational pursuits. Sarah and I shared updates about our latest business developments and travel plans. I have an announcement, Jessica said as we gathered around the dining room table for dinner. Marcus and I set our wedding date for next spring, and we want to pay for it ourselves. We've been saving money from both our jobs, and we think we can afford a nice celebration without asking for help from anyone. The pride in her voice was unmistakable, and I felt genuine happiness for both of them. That's wonderful, Jessica. Independence suits you. Marcus smiled gratefully. We're hoping you and Sarah will be part of the wedding party, not because we expect you to contribute financially, but because we want you there as family. We'd be honored, Sarah replied without hesitation. As the evening wound down and we cleaned up together, I realized that the greatest gift I'd received from this entire experience wasn't the protection of my financial assets or even the satisfaction of seeing justice served. It was the discovery that healthy family relationships were possible when built on foundations of respect, honesty, and genuine care for each other's well-being. Dr. Williams had been right about the importance of boundaries. By refusing to enable my family's destructive patterns, I'd forced all of us to confront our issues and develop healthier ways of relating to each other. The pain of that confrontation had been necessary for the growth that followed. Standing in our driveway as my family prepared to leave, I looked at the two houses side by side and marveled at how different they felt now compared to 6 months ago. Instead of symbols of conflict and resentment, they'd become representations of growth, healing, and the possibility of redemption. "Thank you," Jessica said quietly as she hugged me goodbye, "for not giving up on us when you had every right to do so." "Family isn't about being perfect," I replied. "It's about being willing to learn and grow together." As their car disappeared down the street, Sarah and I stood together in the evening air listening to the gentle sound of our fountain and feeling grateful for the journey that had brought us to this moment of peace. The most important lesson I'd learned was that true strength isn't about protecting yourself from people who might hurt you. It's about maintaining your boundaries while still leaving room for forgiveness and growth. It's about using your advantages to lift others up rather than to punish them for their mistakes. Financial success had given me options, but wisdom had taught me how to use those options in ways that created better outcomes for everyone involved. My family had learned that respect and honest work were more satisfying than manipulation and entitlement. I'd learned that forgiveness and boundaries could coexist when properly balanced. Most importantly, we'd all learned that healthy relationships require ongoing effort and commitment from everyone involved. The work wasn't finished just because we'd reached a good place. Maintaining these improved dynamics would require continued attention and care from all of us. But as I looked at our beautiful home, thought about my successful career, and felt grateful for my loving wife and restored family relationships, I knew that every difficult moment had been worth it for the peace and joy we'd created together. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your success or generosity? How did you balance protecting yourself while still maintaining hope for better relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe for more content about family dynamics and personal growth, and share it with anyone who might benefit from hearing about second chances and the power of healthy boundaries. Thank you for taking this journey with me, and I hope it encourages you to believe that even the most damaged relationships can be healed when people are willing to do the hard work of genuine change. Remember that your worth isn't determined by what you can provide for others, but by who you choose to be in the face of both success and adversity.